Welcome back. In the last video you saw me use this jig to carve this radius dish. In this video I'll show you how I built the jig. I've got to fit bearings to this, so I've got to put a plate on each side because I still want to keep the multi-purpose nature of this. So rather than try and mount things to these that will then get in the way of anything else I add to it, I'm going to attach a plate. But before I do that, I've got to get these sides true. It's true along this edge and along this edge, and the same for below, but this edge and this edge are just a little bit flared due to the way this is all slotted together. So I've just got to take a millimetre off here, not here, and a couple of extra millimetres, maybe 3 millimetres off the other side, and then we'll have nice parallel sides, and I'll be able to put rollers, bearings on it, and it'll all slide between tracks. So that'd be great. And I want to do it in such a way that I can then take those plates off and mount other things on the side when necessary. I don't possess winding sticks, but I can see from this that it's quite a bit out. This edge is considerably higher than this edge, although this side isn't quite straight, so just straightening this will help. Just got to be a bit careful I don't catch the wing nut, but I think I'm okay. There's got a couple of millimetres clearance. Oh dear, come on then. That's straight, but it's still high, so I've got to work on taking extra material away. Looks like that's it, I think. I now have two perfectly parallel sides. These are little dowel locators, and they work really well for this application. Don't know whether they're meant to be 6mm or whether they're like 1/4 of an inch, but they certainly fit in these M6 inserts. So that's where I want the holes. That's where I want the panel. Oh, blimey. Yeah, it was sitting on the edge of the square. Perfect. Nice and flush. Brilliant. I've measured the width of this because I want it absolutely square. The edges line up nicely, but it's 195mm wide here, 194mm here, 192 here, 193 here. So the whole thing is sort of skewed slightly that way. But these measurements are quite useful in that it should be easy to correct, because I can just, by putting 3 washers under there, I almost get to 3mm. This is actually about 2.6mm, but I can put 3 washers there, 2 washers there, 1 washer there, and it should all still line up nicely. If these measurements were such that this had to twist somehow, bend, this might not be so easy. Actually, putting washers under here could be tricky, but let's give it a go. Yep, 195 all round. Now the messy bit. I've got to plot a curve on here, which is the profile of my 28 feet radius dish. I'm going to do a 28 feet one and a 40 feet one. I've done a spreadsheet, and it's actually fairly simple to do, because it's just a series of Pythagoras triangles. If you think about it, if you imagine a triangle drawn here with the radius is always the same, the radius of the hypotenuse is always 28 feet, then when we have a base of 45 centimetres, then the difference between the height of the triangle and the hypotenuse is 11.87 millimeters. So in the centre I'm going to be 11.87 centimeters deep, and then eventually at the edges, the edge being 45 centimeters, I'll be 0 deep. And it's easy to do a spreadsheet to show you all the measurements you need to plot. The reason I'm doing it 45 centimeters wide, that's a 1 meter, that's 90 centimeter dish. The reason I'm doing it that wide is I just want a good run-in at each end. The radius dish is only going to be of 30 centimeters planar radius. Yes, there's 2 radiuses here. The radius of the circle of the dish, and then the radius of its spherical surface. Yeah, so normally you wouldn't go as deep as 11.87 centimetres. I'll only be going half of that really on the actual dish itself. But because my router is going to be on rollers on this template, I want a good run in and a run out, so I've added 15 centimetres on at each end. To mark to an accuracy of more than 0.1 millimetre. Well, even 0.1, I guess 0.2 is about as good as I can get it. This is even out at 20 centimetres, there's only a quarter of a millimetre difference between each plot point. So this is quite tricky to plot. And I'm having to use my superpower of taking my glasses off. I wear contact lenses, and if I take my contact lenses out and wear my glasses, I can see very, very close up. So I can plot to within a quarter of a millimetre. But this is frustrating, but it's got to be done. So 21 to 23 is 8.7, 8 3/4 basically. sum total of my clamps. I need to get more. I love how accurate it is, just it cuts flush. Yay! Now, as good as my bandsawing is, what I now have is a radius block with an outside radius and my template for routing the radius dish with an inside radius, and there are small undulations in this which will show up on the surface of the dish. In fact, I've got a bit of a rock there if I put it off centre. Obviously, if I put this exactly back where I cut it from, it's solid, but move it slightly that way and I've got a slight rock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a sanding block to make this true. But some of you will think this is a bit excessive. First of all, I'm going to put sandpaper on here to get this a little bit more smooth. And then once I've got this smooth, and hopefully a perfect radius, put sandpaper on here and use this to sand the radius block. Overkill? We'll see. Yeah, doing this I can feel the undulations. It's particularly bad just here. It's only a millimetre, or well, it's less than a millimetre out. It's got pretty well, yeah, probably within half a millimetre, but you can feel it with your fingertips. Bit of 80 grit. Just going to put a little bit on the end first. I'm wearing gloves because this this destroys my hands. I've learnt some valuable lessons in dealing with vices. Oh, come on. This really is impossible to put securely in the vice. Now I've got this lovely and smooth. There are a couple of little rough spots there, here, but that's good enough, I think. So we'll put sandpaper on that and now use that to get this true, which is the main aim. But if I ever need a 40-foot sanding radius block in the future, maybe for finishing off the radius dish, here it is. And I've just destroyed the sandpaper getting it off. Oh well. Time to use more sandpaper. One 40-foot radius sanding block. You can see the low spots. These are the important ones because the router might dip slightly as it goes into them. They're not significant at the moment, actually. I may have it flat enough, but I'm just going to see if I can get it perfectly smooth with absolutely no little areas of low points that could cause a little bit of deformity in the surface of the router dish. I've still got a couple of rough patches here and here, but as I can't see anything from the side, it looks true, and just a little bit of roughness I don't think is going to make much of a difference to the finished product. So 80-20 rule, 80% of the effort getting it to this point. No, 20% of the effort getting to this point. Might have to put another 80% in to get it completely true. Of course, the more I work it, the more I risk spoiling the radius, although in theory a 40-foot radius block sanding a 40-foot radius curve shouldn't make any difference. It should just keep the same radius, but I think the less sanding I can do, the better, really. So let's move on to the 28-foot side. Before, and here's what it looks like afterwards. It's not perfect. There's still some low spots, but I've taken away all the high spots, and it feels relatively smooth and certainly feels straight. It was you could definitely feel some undulations before, so I think that's good for our sanding block. We've got a few undulations in here though, and it rocks when I put it in the middle here, but it doesn't rock there and it doesn't rock there, so there's clearly a high spot in the middle. You can see it on the sandpaper. So when we sand that, we'll get rid of the high spot, and this is why we're doing it. 128 feet radius sanding block. And I've taken the high spot off already. Still rocks a little bit. Got a few dips and I've got a few chips, so I need to keep going. Get it nice and smooth. Chips and dips. Well, it's taken me half an hour of sanding, but I've finally got to a point that I'm happy with. I can't visually see any low spots now, and it feels smooth. There is still a rough patch. Oh, actually, no. The rough patches maybe slightly rough there. The rough patches have pretty much gone. There's a slight rough patch there. But what was bothering me was I could see that was dipping down. When I put the ruler across the top, you could really see it dip. I guess you can maybe just be able to see it slightly now, but I'm happy with that, particularly as this side is completely smooth. So it's only just the one spot there that I'm fussing over nothing. It's pretty much, it's done. It's done. These boards, these curved templates that are going to carry the router, they were anything but straight. They were bowing out. In fact, we're starting to pull apart against the tape that was holding them together. So I'm going to have to brace them to make sure they don't either come together or apart when the router's between. I don't want the router jamming. They need to be absolutely parallel. I just hope I've got long enough screws, because these are a bit short. Yeah, I think that's right. As luck would have it, I can use a block as a spacer to get this lined up for screwing. I'm not going to glue anything together, I'm just screwing it all together. And I have calculated all the positions of all the screws so that when I come to screw the outer boards on, nothing gets in the way, hopefully. Wasn't really planning on this, but it seems like a good idea. I'm going to create what is in effect a bench hook. So this will sit over the edge of the bench and it'll give you more clamping options and hopefully make the whole thing just that little bit more stable. So that will be like that. I'm putting the screw holes at different heights below the top, 2 screws each side, so that when I flip it over to do the other radius, the holes don't line up, so the new screws find their own holes. Rather pleased with that. It's a rather sturdy piece of engineering. The bench is moving, but it's not moving relative to the bench. The next thing I've got to do is mark the centre on the bench, because I'm going to drill a small hole on the bench and that's going to be my pivot point. I am rather relying on the fact that this bench is flat. Well, I did plane it flat when I bought it and hopefully it hasn't moved. I guess I ought to check that, but there's not a lot I can do about it now, other than plane it again. Right, let's mark the middle. Managed to avoid going through the top. That will be my pivot. Here's my centre. I'm not going to go all the way through with the dowel, but I am going to go all the way through with a 2mm drill, just so I know where the centre is on the other side. Although I don't know that I actually need to. If I've got all my measurements correct, I don't think it matters. It matters where... What am I trying to say? It should all sort itself out. I won't need to know exactly where the middle is, I don't think. Anyway. The centre marked. I'm just going to go in about the same depth as I did before. Yay! That's worked really well. I've got this positioned in the middle, and I'm just going to mark where the rail is. I've got this sitting on a block of wood, so this is the height that I want it to ride at, and I'm going to achieve that using skateboard bearings. So I've got to work out where the centre line is on this. In fact, I could mark a provisional centre line just there. But we've got to, actually that's probably sufficient, but I will measure it all. But let's get this all drilled, get the bearings mounted and hope that it's all level. I'm going to try and be as precise as I can here. This is only just long enough. So that's my carriage, and I'm just going to add 2 washers to each of the sides. Just I want less play between the sides of the the carriage. This will just bring this plate out a little bit and should make the router quite snug between the two guides. I don't know whether I'm going to make life hard for myself putting these washers here, whether I can get the bolts in. There we go. Thought I'd just show you the planning nightmare that this was. Because of this here, I was very limited on what I could put where, and this support post here, unlike the other three, which are fairly well symmetrical, I had to put further in. And I realised when I was doing this that it was going to be tight when I came to put the pivots in on the outside, because I needed to get pivots equidistant either side of the router bit and level. And in the end, you can see that is right up against the post, but I managed to do it. I couldn't have these any closer without this post getting in the way, and I didn't want to cut away at the post, although with hindsight it probably wouldn't have mattered cutting a little bit of that post away. But I couldn't have these any closer because of that, and I couldn't have them any further apart because they also had to avoid the post going the other way. So actually there was only a millimetre tolerance on where I could put the pivots, but the bearings. But we got there. But you can see how close this all is in terms of where everything is. So it kind of designed itself by the ergonomics, not ergonomics, the layout of the router. At first sight, this appears wonderful. However, I got a very slight play. So what I'm going to try and do is move the bearing over here. I've got to try and just move it up a little bit. When I was drilling this, I noticed I was out by just probably only about less than a millimetre, but it's enough to make it wobble very slightly. Annoying, but I'm going to get this exactly right, so I'm just going to move that bearing up slightly just by filing away at the hole. A little bit of adjusting of the bearings and actually twisting the plate, because these are M6 bolts holding the plate on. M6 bolts are actually 5.8 millimeters wide, so you do have a little bit of play. So I've just twisted this side plate a little bit, and there we go. It's smooth, it doesn't wobble. I'm really happy with that. There we go. If you want to see this jig in action, you'll have to go back to the previous video. Unusually for me, I did it in reverse order this time. So go back there and we'll see you in the next project, which will be something else. Bye!